I don't find myself stunned very often. I find myself pretty moderately stunned at the outcome we just got here in Norman. Bama wins 34-24, by the way. After the start we got 17 to nothing. I'm not going to publicize my texts, but some of my texts, if they were revealed publicly, would lead you to believe that I thought the game was kind of over. I just did. I just did. Alabama didn't feel that way, but I did because I stood on the field and I watched how lethargic things looked offensively. Not just that, I mean, how little time Ty Simpson had to work with. And I mean, look, you watched the same game I did. Let's talk about it. Resiliency is a word that gets thrown around a lot, but it really does apply here. If you weren't here, you really probably can't fully appreciate just how nasty Oklahoma was up front in the first half. Um, how much this place can lean in on you psychologically. You're starting the game the same way that you started and finished the Georgia game. And so there's all room for doubt to creep in. And you're already 0-2 against those guys in the past couple of seasons. They came to your building, knocked you off earlier in the year. Same old, same old. That's what a normal mentality would have been. So it took an extraordinary mentality to dig out of that. And it was going to take a three-phase approach, which is probably my biggest takeaway from this game is the sort of role reversal from game one, when, of course, you could look at the box score and you could think that Alabama outplayed Oklahoma, and yet Oklahoma won because of turnovers. At a I'm looking at a drive chart right now, but also I'm looking at a box score that has a lot of bad luck stats in it. Bad luck stats are the opposite of padlock stats for us and those unfamiliar with the channel. Bama got outgained 362 to 261. 18 to 12 first down age for Oklahoma. 7 minute time of possession edge. Our buddy Parker Fleming loves that so much. 75 to 54 total plays edge. I think Bama ran 22 plays in the first half, but they won because turnovers are a very, very, very crazy and very, very game altering stat, especially in games like this. But when Ty Simpson was finally given a little time to throw, and Ty Simpson finally started to cook a little bit towards the half, I looked at the guy to my left, I looked at the guy to my right. We didn't know each other. We had just been talking most of the first half, and I said, "Uh-oh, uh-oh." And that's with a pick six by Xavier Brown added in, and special teams play ends up putting three on the board for Alabama after a turnover, and you're looking there, and I found myself saying, "How?" How after 17-0 down. But the how was Bama just basically copied and pasted the exact same way Oklahoma beat them in Tuscaloosa about a month and change ago. So several things going through my mind right now. I'm still in the stadium, and so I normally wait until Sunday night, but since this was a Friday night game, I thought that in the second half, when we were coming out of the tunnel for the third quarter, it's 17 all. And I thought both sides could kind of feel good. I mean, OU got a 17-0 lead. They're minus two turnovers at that point, but they're still tied. Okay, so you could look at that as a positive. With Alabama, I mean, of course, you were down 17-0, you're left for dead, and then you just get totally off the deck, and you've got the ball to start the third quarter, and so you feel like you've built up a lot of momentum. But I felt like it was a kind of pick 'em game at that point, and it was going to come down to Ty Simpson. You knew he was going to have no ground game. He did not have a ground game. Jam Miller played sparingly in this game. In fact, think about this. If we just kind of build the pancake of this win, so to speak, Jam Miller, we talked a lot about his availability coming into this game, how it's going to be so important for Alabama to be able to use tailbacks in the passing game out of the backfield. Wasn't really much of a factor at all tonight. Jam Miller played sparingly. I assume they had him on a pitch count. He gave them what he could give them. So you really don't get that. Josh Cuevas made a couple of plays. Josh Cuevas gave him everything that he could, but wasn't like a fundamental, like game-changing part. As it turns out of the offensive script, they go 2 of 12 on third down. They're also down 17-0 early. There's just so many things that if you told me Ryan Williams, non-existent, another key drop, Jeremy Bernard didn't do a whole lot in this game. There's so many things that if you say that stuff out loud and you stack it on top of each other, you think this is going to be a repeat of the SEC championship game. And instead, they got 34 on the board, -7 for the pick six. They're 27. You could even take the three away because they were set up with a special teams turnover inside the red zone or close to it, I think. Still 24 offensive points. If I told you that some of that stuff was going to click, you probably would have thought, maybe Bama scores 24 today. Maybe that's good enough. So that's a lot to be proud of, and it's a lot to wonder now that you get a little over a week before you go out to the Rose Bowl and you play Indiana, you start to think, okay, well, with another week, a week and a half to heal up, what does Josh Cuevas look like then? Do you get LT Overton back? A lot of stuff that is going to be borne out in the coming days. Tim Keenan, I know, came out of the game late, looked like he could have come back in, but man.
Quick 5-second timeout. Check and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. It keeps it free. We love you. All right, back to the show.
Just take a second. A lot of Alabama games over the years, a lot of big wins. It's not a program that had to come from behind a whole lot under Nick Saban. I'm not saying they never did it, but you just down 17. I don't remember a whole lot of times that happening on the road in this environment. Cannot give enough credit. Just infinite amounts of praise to Oklahoma and game day operations staff here, and the way this place was just on fire. It was so charged up. They were so ready for this thing. And you got that defense eating, and you got Ty Simpson running for his life in the first half. And man, Kane Womack and that defensive staff, they played a heck of a game. And they knew they had to step up. And that's the funny thing about the turnover margin. I never, ever, ever called that totally randomized in the first game. Even though turnovers on the whole are a randomized stat, Oklahoma was very intentional about the way they forced turnovers in the first game. However, if you're trying to apply it moving forward, you can't bake that into the next games. My counterpoint was, hey, yeah, Oklahoma forced turnovers and they won the first time around. And everyone talked going into this game about how Bama can't afford to turn the ball over. They can't afford to turn the ball over. Well, that's true. Neither can Oklahoma. And I don't think that got talked about enough. We mentioned it on the channel a couple of times. I picked Oklahoma to win the game. I just thought there were several more things that I could rely on with them as opposed to Alabama, which turned out to be not true. But every single word that came out of my mouth about Oklahoma was followed with, however, they can't do the stuff they forced Alabama to do in the first go around. Well, they did. So they lost the game. It's about that simple. Producer Jesse is texting me as I'm recording here. Indiana, Bama in the Rose Bowl. Indiana, a 6.5-point favorite over Alabama. It's a whole new world. It's a whole new world in college football. Honestly, I thought that thing was going to be over 7. So that number's a little bit shorter even than I thought. We'll have plenty of time to talk about that game. But special teams from a starting field position standpoint, glaringly different than it was the first time around. I got the sheet from the preview that we did the other night. That obviously, I mean, that was the thing I talked about all week, but also I had written down on the piece of paper, what should I expect from Oklahoma's offense? Because they didn't run the ball that great tonight either. They're not a great rushing offense either. You knew Mateer was going to have to run the ball a lot. He never really had many game breakers. Bama, by the way, in the second half had 5 passes for 20 plus yards, or in the whole game, 5 passes for 20 plus yards. So the explosive plays were there for them. Missed opportunities for both teams, but man, I felt like there was a moment in time there. If you're going to circle, any part of this game, fourth down, I think probably early second quarter, midway through the second quarter, where it's 17-0. And Bama could kick a field goal. They choose to go for it. And Latier Brooks catches the ball short of the goal line and gets his way across the goal line. One of, I think, 2 touchdowns that he had tonight. I don't have the live stats in front of me. Your season's on the line there. I can't definitively prove to you Bama would have lost the game if they didn't score there, but I got a pretty good feeling Bama would have lost the game if they didn't score there. You never know. They could go on to lose by 30 to Indiana for all we know. But you never know. As a team gets healthier, as a team starts to feel itself, as it gets hot, you go back to that play. It seems like all the championship runs are like that. You go back to that play Ohio State last year, Jack Sawyer, the pick down near the goal line in the Texas game. You just go back to some of these plays and you think to yourself, boy, if that wouldn't have happened, would all of this have happened? I have no idea how far Bama can go. But I know, kind of like we talk about with Georgia all the time, you need to cut the head off the snake when you got a chance to cut the head off the snake. OU in their own building was up 17 tonight, and they couldn't cut the head off the snake. And so now that snake, Crimson Snake, lives to play another game in the Rose Bowl. I'll say this about Brent Venables and Oklahoma. I'm sure in the post-mortem of this, the further you get removed, you judge the whole season as opposed to just the game. The game's a crushing disappointment because they could not have started better. I mean, you're talking about there were various points in the first half where OU had more first downs than Bama had total yards. They had more first downs than Bama had total plays run. And I'm not talking about after one or two drives either. I'm talking about in the early portions of the second quarter. It's just all set up. They could not have scripted it better. They were bleeding clock, which strangely they continued to do in the second half, even when they didn't have the lead. Yes, of course, tonight sucks. But I think when Mateer went down earlier this year and came back and their offense, I'm not saying it was just because of the injury, but because of a lot of factors, their offense was just a shell of what it had been. I didn't expect them to be a playoff team by that point, and they still found a way to get in the playoffs. I think, given what that team was from that point forward, I think they kind of maximized their potential. And at the very least, I mean, there was some sort of quiet chatter about Brent Venables coming into this year. I feel like that's quieted down. Curious clock management tonight, but on the whole, I think that quieted down a little bit. But Alabama, man, Kalen DeBoer, there was so much talk going into this game. Again, it's kind of an inflection point game. Not the stupid hot seat stuff. I don't mean that. There was the Michigan stuff floating around. I've been pretty adamant about how I feel towards that dynamic, but I couldn't ignore that it existed. I couldn't ignore that people were talking about it. Talked to some people on the field before the game. They didn't think much of it at all. They said it had minimal impact in lead up to prep. And so now you're going to, I don't know what'll happen to that talk, but you're going to have a big, big opportunity to go out to the West Coast in a building where a Big Ten team ended your season the last time you were there. That was against Michigan. This will be against Indiana. This was a really, really fun trip for us in Norman. As I'm recording, I'm about to head to College Station for the Miami A&M game, but wanted to get some of these thoughts up. Of course, we'll have a lot more on the Sunday night show, but hey, a Friday night in the SEC in Norman, Oklahoma, Alabama crawls out of the grave and goes on a 34-7 run to win this game 34-24.